Okay, hold on. Family. You know, it's gonna take me a little second to get my life together. Oh, excuse me. Hope you all have been having a fantastical week. It's a little rainy outside right now, but honestly, I feel like we need it to wash some of the emotions away and give us that opportunity for cleansing and all those good things. Get my other way to monitor. So, uh, 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 today I am trying to see if the poll will work or if the giveaway will work. Because if it does work, we're gonna use them to do some interactive things. This book that I show you every week is one that I need to necessarily give away. And I want to see if the tools that we have in place will allow us to do that. Right? I want to give it away. Thanks for joining. It's your first time. Make sure you come back here Tuesday where we do a little learning. Thursday is our down day, our relaxed day. And it's book club. So if it's your first time here, welcome to Soul Swami Live, where we discuss all things healing and the opportunity or in the evolution of ourselves to becoming the best version. We do that to create a collective energy or be a part of collective energy of people who all want to be the best version of themselves and an energetic space that allows us for vulnerability, clarity, and all the things we need to evolve. We do this through live energy readings. We do this through learning new lessons and information. We have homework activities. We do a bunch of different things to be able to support that. This week, we actually started our discussions on ego. We've mentioned and talked about ego a little bit before, but we got a little bit deeper. This is our spinoff of our Tuesday night show, which is Thursday Night Book Club, in an effort to allow us to reconnect with that childlike energy in us by letting someone read to us. We do this every Tuesday and Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Instagram. So share, like, make sure you follow, subscribe, whatever you need to do so you can get that notification and you can get some of that good news delivered directly to you. And definitely on Tuesday nights, if you feel a little inspired, make sure you hit the link to join us so we can do an energy reading. Excuse me. So at the start of each show, we generally do a little energy work. And this week we are continuing with what we started on Tuesday, our crown. The crown is the energy focal point or chakra for your consciousness, your spiritual connection, and your connection to that sacred knowledge, that information that you can't just quite say where you got it, how you know it, but you know it, and you know it to be true, right? Facts only support you. So that's what your crown do. The element for that, of course, is your thoughts. So crown is in control of your thoughts, and all of this to make sure you be mindful of your thoughts. If you are into color therapy, you want to think violet when you're thinking about your crown. So that's either eat some violet stuff, purple stuff, wear some violet clothes, purple clothes, spend some time in some violet lights, and all those things will help to activate your crown energy. If you are into essential oils, you want to think frankincense. Essential oils are aromatherapy. You want to think frankincense. You want to think rosewood, You want to think myrrh, sandalwood, lavender are all good scents to activate the energy of your crown. And if you are into crystals and gemstones, you want to think selenite, amethyst, that's citrine. I look over there all the time at this big old stone that I have here when I say amethyst, but it is not amethyst. Technically, it's not amethyst. It is citrine, 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 citrine. You want to think moonstone, clear quartz, and our favorite, diamonds. They are more than a girl's best friend. They are good stones to activate the energy, support the energy of your crown, your thoughts, and all those good things. So the next thing we do is a little bit of sound healing. I'll play the bowl for a second, and then I don't know. My spirit was thinking about. So we'll do a little bit of that too, and then we'll do some breath work. My spirit is thinking about 333 triangle breathing, affirmations, and then we'll jump on the reading part. Right. So again, if you are on, well, honestly, any site, but specifically Twitch, let me know if you see the poll or if you see the. It should be coming up at any minute. Definitely, you see the poll or the giveaway. Both of them are tests. The poll is, do you see this poll? The giveaway is test giveaway. But it's setting the foundation for future uses, right? So now during the sound healing time, all you really need to do is just relax, be mindful of your thoughts, close your eyes, and just kind of listen to the sound as I play it. What is that? Now I got a notification I've never seen in my life. Oh, well. Day late and $1 short. Oh, man. I don't care about that. Next, we will do our breath work. And today, we are going to do triangle breathing. If you are unfamiliar with triangle breathing, it is very simple. It is you breathe in for a 3 count. You hold your breath for 3 counts. And you exhale for a 3 count. And breath work is always good to transmute certain energy. And it is very good to making sure that you're not too far in the future with worries or too far in the past with concerns. And they help you stay present and connected. So during this time, all you have to do is just do the breath work and listen to the sound of my voice as I guide you through. On the count of 3, we will start with triangle breathing. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in 3, 2, 3. Hold 3, 2, 3. Release 3, 2, 3. Breathe in 3, 2, 3. Hold 3, 2, 3. Release 3, 2, 3. Last time, family. Breathe in 3, 2, 3. Hold 3, 2, 3. Release 3, 2, 3. The next thing we'll do is affirmations. During the affirmation time, all you have to do is listen to the sound of my voice, just like breath work, and repeat these affirmations after me. These are very good for reminding you of your worthiness and helping you stay present as well as breath work, right? So, again, repeat after me. I am divine. I am connected to the universe. I am at peace. I am a spiritual being. I release doubt and welcome faith. I am divine. I am connected to the universe. I am at peace. And that's a good one. I am a spiritual being. And I release doubt and welcome faith. All right. So now we can get this party started with our readings. What's going on now? I think, William Wheeler has called in the cavalry, whatever that means. And the cavalry, because they haven't quite seen what it was yet, but they are attacking the island of women and children. And the good thing about that is the women and children so far seem to have been able to escape on a little boat. Excuse me. And the only people left on the island right now are Apollo and I forget what the Cal, that's her name. Right. I keep on thinking I should remember Cal. That's my yeah. As a matter of fact, that's short my brother's middle name. Short version of it is Kyle, so I should ever always remember Kyle. All right, so relax and enjoy. We are on chapter 69 if you are following along with your own reading. They moved quickly but carefully along the earthen ledge, and when they reached the rocks, they scrambled down. As they descended, they saw less and less of the Merricat. The Merricat is the boat that the women and children have escaped on. The farther the trawler moved, the more chill for Kyle became. They weren't far from the creek boat, but still high enough that they could see the trees. And then, as casual as you please, Kindergarten walked out from out the shadows. Head to foot, he was covered in brick dust. Dust in his hair and all over his clothes. His skin looked like speckled and nearly red. He looked like a demon. He walked out of the ferry, slipped and scanned the water. Cal crouched and Apollo crouched too, but he wasn't used to the terrain, so he fell backward, down the sloping rocks, coming to a stop at the water's edge. Cal scrambled after him. Apollo, Kindergartner called. Could that be you? Don't tell me the bitches left you behind. No talking now. Cal shoved Apollo toward the creek boat. The craft was olive green, making it nearly invisible in the dark water. Cal gestured toward the boat and lifted a black aluminum paddle. He reached for it, but she swatted his hand away. She bent low and balanced the paddle on half the rock ledge and half on the creek boat. She patted his ass, then gestured for him to sit on the paddle. When he did, she waved her hand for him to scoot himself into the little boat. Poor Apollo, Kindergarten howled. Someone's always abandoning you. From the sound of his voice, Kindergarten had stalked off in the opposite direction to try to find him, the sound of Apollo stumbling hard to trace under the echoing sky. Apollo flopped into the creek boat. The small craft lifted 4 inches out of the water, enough to make Apollo fear it would capsize. Cal brought her hand down on the edge of the boat and righted it. She leaned close. I have to confess, she whispered. I have to say this before you go. Come with me, Apollo said, grasping the sides of the creek boat as he tried to calm himself. This thing is small, but we could try to fit. Kindergarten appeared at the top of the slope. He scanned the water from the rocks. He pointed. There, he shouted. There. He sounded like a master sicking his hound on the prey. Both Cal and Apollo looked up at the man on the rocks. Further behind him came that thunderous sound, a colossal tearing noise. No, Cal whispered. The sky filled with something. It looked as large as a low-flying plane, too big to be a man-made missile. It was a tree, going end over end through the air, out across the water. A fucking tree. No, Cal begged. The darkness hid the impact, but there was a tremendous splash. Had the boat been hit? Faintly they heard the chug of the boat's engine. Kindergarten clapped softly, pointed again. There! Cal turned and reached into her sweater pocket. When her hand appeared, it held a gun, a Ruger LCR-22. She aimed at the Kindergarten. She shot him. Even though they were outside, despite the small caliber of the gun, Apollo's eyes went out of focus from the terrific blast, the gun's report. He watched Cal, but she seemed to work in slow time. The creek boat bobbled in the water, and Apollo felt his stomach seize as if he would throw up. She fired 4 more times, and on the third pull, she grazed him. Kindergartner didn't scream. He gurgled and fell back and disappeared from view. Apollo's ears rattled and throbbed for another moment. He'd been expecting to see another tree flying out overhead, but that didn't happen. Cow gunfire had changed the plan. She protected her people again. It's funny that he actually talked about how loud a gun is. If you've ever taken time and went to a range, they give you earmuffs. But when you actually shoot them, you don't have those earmuffs. And being that close to a gun being shot, whether you're shooting it or somebody else shooting it, is loud. You know the myth of Callisto? She asked. She was a nymph. She had a child by Zeus, and for this she was punished by his wife, Hera. Callisto was turned into a bear. Zeus suffered no consequences, of course. The baby grew up to be a great hunter, Arcas. One day, Callisto saw Arcas in the woods, and recognizing her child, she wanted to hug him, to speak with him. But all Arcas saw was a great bear attacking. He was about to shoot her with an arrow when Zeus saved them both and turned them into constellations, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. I always saw this as a happy end, as happy as those Greek stories ever get. Callisto got to spend eternity there in the heavens with her child. She could always see him. She would always know he was safe. Cal looked out at the water and then caught Apollo's eyes. I'm tired, and I want to see my little boy again. She handed Apollo the paddle, sat on her butt, and with 2 feet she pushed him away from the rocks. You have to go to your son's grave, Cal said. You have to see it for yourself, so you have no doubts. You won't be any use to Emma otherwise. How am I going to track her down? Apollo asked. Emma swore Brian was alive. She knew it, felt it. That was the last time I saw her. She said she'd finally narrowed it down. To what? Apollo whispered. Cal reloaded her pistol. She said Brian is in the forest. I've thought about that. There's only one forest in all of New York. Apollo used the paddle to push off. When he drifted backward a few yards, he turned in the boat in the water with the paddle. He looked back to see Cal climbing back up the rocks. What are you going to do, Cal? He called. She looked out at him. She appeared calm. I'm going to show them my claws, she said. Soon she disappeared over the ridge. Gun, Kindergartner shouted. Get her gun. Quickly there was some distance between Apollo and the island. The splash of the East River against the creek boat became louder. Apollo was beginning to understand just how far he'd have to paddle at night in the cold before he reached the far shore of the Bronx. He didn't look back at the island when he paddled. He tried, but as best as he could, to stay quiet. Why? Cal's words came back to him. The big one can swim. I am the god Apollo, he whispered, trying to focus in on a tornado of madness. He kept on, and once North Brother Island disappeared behind him, there was only the distant shore to focus on. He picked a cluster of apartment buildings as his guiding light. He used the projects to lead him back to land. I am the god Apollo. After 15 minutes, he felt so tired that few thoughts remained, only the mechanical practice of the paddle rising and falling. He doubted he'd be able to last at this without some help, but what help could he hope for out here on the water? After another 20 minutes, and he despaired. The Bronx seemed no closer. Still, he kept going. I am. He couldn't finish the sentence. The shore finally became visible. It was the edge of the Barreto Point Park. You have to go to your son's grave. You have to see it for yourself so you have no doubts. Apollo finally felt ready to know who was buried at Nassau Knoll Cemetery in Port Washington, New York. All right. So for me, I don't know anything else that happened because that is where the show ended, the first season, and there is no second season. So all of this will be new for us together, family. Part 6, Big Dig. Chapter 70. How fast would a Honda Odyssey need to be traveling in order to smash through a wrought iron cemetery gates? Apollo Kagwa tried to do the math. He'd abandoned the creek boat at the edge of the Barretto Point Park and ambled to the closest subway station, East 149th Street, on the 6th line. He descended the stairs in wet jeans and boots, dog-tired and half-crazed with otherworldly knowledge, and even the homeless man squatting at the station looked at him with mistrust and worry. Okay, I hear myself. No, I wasn't tripping. When he reached the turnstile, he reached for his wallet so he could swipe his Metro card, a habit so ingrained that even now he couldn't stop himself. And this was when he remembered it had been lost in the waters of the North Brother Island when he'd almost been drowned. Since he'd survived, maybe it was more like a baptism. Reborn now as what? Maybe it would, oh, excuse me. Apollo hopped the turnstile, then waited on the downtown 6, calculating the amount of force required to ram a car through Nassau Knoll Cemetery gate. He assumed he'd be going in during the night. It was doubtful they just let you dig up a grave while sun was up. But by the time he got home, it was nearly morning, a Wednesday. Thousands of people off to work, as New Yorkers do. They studiously avoided looking at Apollo, even as he paid him their full attention. If he acted crazy and dangerous, they might switch cars. But if he only looked crazy and deranged, they tolerated him. He stood the whole time because he felt he'd pass out if he sat. He reached the apartment and let himself in, took off his clothes, and it was as if he had taken off an exoskeleton or a cast. Without the clothes, his body melted. He hardly made it to the bedroom before he passed out, and when he woke up, it was evening. He felt no better rested, but he could sit up, stand up, and almost in passing, he forced himself to eat. He dressed and went on the computer to reserve a zip car. When he discovered the Honda Odyssey was available, Suave, the same one he'd driven when he and Bree found the first edition in Riverdale, it felt like fate. Apollo drove from Manhattan into Queens, and from Queens out to Plainview, Long Island, Nassau Knoll Cemetery. Concentrate on that. He'd never been good at math, but he thought 50 miles an hour in a 4,400-pound vehicle would tear a pair of iron gates apart. Good luck, bro. Chapter 71. The front entrance to Nassau Knoll Cemetery sits on Port Washington Boulevard, and while the grounds are enormous, those grounds are still residential neighborhood. Even more to the point, the Port Washington Police Department sits literally right next door to the cemetery, and the Port Washington Fire Department is across the street. And yet Apollo Kagwa noticed that none of this as he burned down the Port Washington Boulevard approaching ramming speed. He slowed down a bit only when he calculated that he couldn't drive straight into the gates from Port Washington Boulevard, so he made a right on Revere Road. Then he turned the Odyssey around in the parking lot of a pharmacy. Now moving west on Revere, he pressed his foot onto the gas pedal. It was 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, and the roads were empty in that baffling suburban way. He zoomed down Revere Road in almost a meditative silence. He crossed the Port Washington Boulevard doing 35 miles an hour. Then, what? Where did Patrice come from? Excuse me. Then Patrice Green stamped his size 15 foot on the brakes, and the Odyssey spun out in half circle, and the howl of the tires seemed loud enough to rouse the living and the dead. Apollo levitated in his seat. The seatbelt slapped him back down. His head spun a moment longer than the car. He bit his tongue and let go of the wheel. "What's your plan?" Patrice asked Apollo from the passenger seat. "You're just going to bust through the gates with the police department right up the road." Apollo's foot had come off the gas. He looked down at it as if it had betrayed him. Patrice's big old hoof remained steady on the brakes. Apollo looked back at Patrice with the constant catatonic air. He'd pick up the big man because he needed Patrice's help. Digging up the grave would be exhausting work. Okay, there we go. Now we know how Patrice wound up in the car with him. If you knew here, Patrice is his homeboy from A Minute when they were selling books together. I was going to say book shopping, but they weren't shopping. Well, they were kind of. But he hadn't said a thing about the tribute page. Patrice still believed Apollo didn't know who started the damn thing, but Apollo had a hard time placating. Kept wanting to haul off and crack his former friend in the teeth. "I'd suggest we drive back to the parking lot and turn the car off," Patrice said. Apollo watched Patrice for a second. "You hear me in there?" Patrice punched Apollo, not lightly. "I told you I'd help you," he said calmly as he could. "You came to my place, told me and Dana a lot of shit that didn't make any fucking sense, but it didn't matter. We're your friends, do or die." "Friends?" Apollo repeated. "Plus, Dana was heated this guy took us for all that money," Patrice said. "We thought we could put a down payment on a place, but we're going to spend the money this motherfucker stole from his dead wife." "Okay." Patrice, his wife ain't dead. Patrice rubbed the top of his head so softly. "I admit, I was still kind of impressed with what he pulled off. High technical skill, no question. A worthy foe." Patrice slipped the car in the park, took his foot off the brake, opened the iPad case sitting in his lap, and turned the tablet on. "Right now, though, you and me are two black men sitting in the minivan in the middle of a road in the middle of white-ass Long Island, and that's bound to draw attention soon enough. I told you I'd help you, so let me help, cool?" "Yeah," Apollo said. "You're my friend after all." Patrice watched Apollo thoughtfully for a few seconds. "Yeah, first thing we need to do is back up. Put the car in reverse." Apollo nodded. He might as well have been a robot working under voice commands. Now the car coasted backwards slowly. "You'll have to steer this thing," Patrice said, looking out the back, "'cause right now you're about to go up on the sidewalk." Apollo looked into the rearview mirror, then the passenger mirror, then finally turned the wheel. He parked in the spot behind the pharmacy on the corner. When Patrice demanded the car keys, Apollo handed them over. "You know, if me and Dana had kids like you once suggested, I couldn't be out here helping you right now," he grinned. "Now, thank your child-free friend." "Thank you," Apollo said softly. "You're welcome." Chapter 72. They sat in the dark in the Honda Odyssey and listened for police sirens that never came. They did hear one car cruising down Port Washington Boulevard, but dismissed it. Someone on their way home, that's all. But then, after a minute of silence, The same car, at least it sounded like the same car, prowled past in the other direction. Its engine had a grim, grumbling quality to it, a powerful engine, barely restrained. The pharmacy blocked their view so they couldn't see the vehicle. Was it some random car or a police cruiser? Neither of them were going to walk out on the corner to check. They were like two fish taking shelter in a cove because the shark might be in the open water. Patrice's iPad had gone off, so he turned it on again. The lock screen showed Patrice and Dana on their wedding day. Bride and groom in a tuxedo and gown stood below an indoor basketball hood. Okay. You two got married on the court? We made it work, Patrice said, looking down at the image of his face lit up by the LED screen and the memory. After a moment, he swiped right, and the home screen appeared, a familiar grid of apps. He swapped from one screen to the next. Apollo and Patrice heard the same car for the third time, prowling Port Washington Boulevard. Apollo rolled his window down, leaned out, and this time saw a faint glow of the car's headlights as they lit up the storefront in the opposite corner. They paused there, as if the driver and the car were idling in the street. The vehicle sat on the other side of the pharmacy, and the engine grumbling and its lights played in the darkness. To Apollo's ear, it sounded almost nearly like whatever he heard on that island that night, whatever had been lurking in that corpse of trees. With his head out the window, he looked up at the sky as if some great object might be coming down on their car right now, flung by something impossibly strong. But the only thing visible in the sky was the moon and a sprinkle of stars, and then the car, who drove it, trundled on again. Maybe it had just been waiting at a red light. Apollo didn't roll the window up again until the gutter of the engine passed on. When Apollo pulled his head back in, Patrice had Google Maps working. Nassau Knoll Cemetery is almost 400 acres, Patrice said. 3 million people are buried here. It's big enough that there's got to be some part of the fencing that's easy to slip through. Patrice had become so occupied with his Google map, he didn't realize Apollo had swiped back his keys until they were in the ignition and the engine was turned on. The Odyssey roared even as it set in park. We can just drive around the perimeter, Apollo said. You don't need to rely on computers for everything. Patrice reached over and turned the car off. He spoke to Apollo again with aggravated patience. The two of us are not driving around slow in a suburban neighborhood at midnight. Somebody's gonna call the cops on some shit like that. And I did not survive Iraq to get shot to death by some Suffolk County cop who feared for his life. You feel me? Patrice watched Apollo now. Then let's get out and walk, Apollo said. Patrice nodded. 2 black men walking through white suburbs at night. Never heard of that going bad. Apollo gave an exasperated laugh. We can be heroes, Patrice said, but heroes like us don't get to make mistakes. Patrice typed in Nassau Knoll Cemetery, Street View. Patrice said, licking his lips as if he had been given a salty treat. That's what I'm talking about, Patrice finally said. He lifted the screen for Apollo to see. The image captured a sunny afternoon. The portion of the cemetery fencing looked as if it had been torn open, a gap wide enough to fit this truck through. Something big did that, Apollo said softly. Maybe a truck or a car, Patrice said, closing the iPad. Big accident. Maybe. Apollo leaned. Oh man, that rain is going off. Apollo leaned out the window and listened for the prowl car. How long did he wait? He couldn't quite say. Too long, probably, which is when he realized there might be another reason he wasn't gunning the Honda. There are some things people aren't meant to see. Even with all he'd experienced on the island, Apollo understood that whatever lay buried in that grave existed as the furthest landmark on the new map of a spectral territories, ultima thule of grief. Would he go insane if he opened that casket? Would he burst into flames, turn to stone? Despite all of this, he finally turned the key. He pulled the Honda out of the parking lot and drove down Revere Road, not going too fast or too slow, nothing to cause concern among the locals. In those old stories, the myth and the fairy tales Cal had talked about, the heroes did what they did, but you never knew why. In the stories, at least, there had no interior life. Their job was simply to act. Gods and Gorgons allied against them, and they still bore the spear and the shield. Still, they walked into the deep, dark forest. But did those heroes ever feel like Apollo did now? The real people, not the characters they became. They were human beings too, after all. They must have shivered in the shadow of the world of great horrors. They must have wondered how they would ever see the quest through, and somehow they persevered. Maybe that was the point of telling those stories again and again, one generation to the next. If they can be brave, then we might be too. Chapter 73. The modern grave is only 4 feet deep, not 6. In the past, bodies were buried 6 feet deep to compensate for their eventual decomposition, and sometime after that, the casket collapsing on itself, leaving a sinkhole. But the modern casket is much thicker and sturdier, and many have steel reinforcements so that it produces no sinkhole. As a secondary precaution, caskets are now buried inside concrete grave liners, like a casket for a casket. This concrete vault is another reason that being buried 4 feet deep is fine in the modern day. Patrice explained this as they walked through the cemetery. A dash of research done on the quick, and these two men padded across the dirt in the dark. Patrice looked up the location of Brian Cacklew's burial plot. Nassau Knoll was so large they could have wandered for a half a day without stumbling across it, but the cemetery's website included a handy PDF. They used the community mausoleum, a white building that looked like a banquet hall, as kind of a North Star. Brian's grave lay behind the building. There would be a road that they could follow on the other side. They weren't 30 yards into the graveyard before they heard the rumbling engine of the prowl car again. Both stopped moving and turned back towards the fence line. There was no trees there, but the moonlight was weak. They heard the car. It coasted, and soon its lights played through the fence posts like cars being run along spokes of a bike tire. The light raked at the graveyard dirt. Apollo and Patrice didn't dare to even crouch. The car reached the big break in the fence line, and there it stopped. Apollo saw a silhouette of a car, but couldn't be sure whether there were police lights on the roof. The car idled there. Then they heard a mechanical hiss of a window rolling down. Could it be kindergarten at the wheel? I would have known we were here. Another moment. Another moment. Then arcingly, slowly, the car moved on. Once the red lights disappeared down the block, Patrice opened the iPad and scanned the map quickly. The maintenance building is on the far end, he said, pointing toward the mausoleum. The maintenance shed was a prefab, beige metal building, 2 stories high and 50 feet long. As big as the mausoleum, but it had been tucked behind the line of trees so it disappeared in the night. Apollo was sure it was there only because of the bright yellow Caterpillar backhoe loader parked at the edge of the trees. I could run that backhoe, Patrice offered. Apollo kicked at one of the enormous tires. That probably wouldn't make much noise at 12:30 at night. Patrice simply blinked at him. We need old-fashioned tools, Apollo said. They walked the perimeter of the building. It had a rectangular shape, and on one of the longer sides set three sets of orange doors. Apollo went along trying to lift each one, but all were locked, at least the garage doors. Apollo lost his shit for about 10 seconds and rattled at the door handle as if he could shake it open. There's got to be an alarm system, Patrice warned. Apollo let go of the door handle and stared back at his friend. Patrice hadn't been scolding him, but was thinking out loud. Patrice moved alongside the building, but he wasn't bothering the doors. Instead, he scanned the upper corners of the building. He pointed to a corner where a gray box the size of a router had been affixed on the wall. Now, let's say they've modernized this place in the last few years, and someone convinced them to go from a wired alarm system to a wireless alarm system. He flipped on the iPad and swept through the grid of applications. He tapped an app and tapped it twice more, then watched as a series of numbers appeared in a box toward the bottom of the screen. This is some late 90s technology they're using. I kind of feel bad for them. They probably paid some dude more than they should have paid for some shit that stopped being effective 15 years ago. They heard the wireless alarm system and just nodded and signed the check. Our money says, "In God we trust," but technology is catching up. I know that's right. Hello? He laughed at this quiet, a proud member of an upstart faith. He think he a computer faith. That's why. Now, what we're going to do is pretty simple. I'm going to use this app to send some radio noise back to the central control system. It'll be like I'm playing my radio a lot louder than the alarm system's radio. When we push this open this door, that radio signal will die out. But my radio signal will be playing so loud that the system won't be able to tell that its radio has gone quiet. Patrice tapped the screen, and small blue circles in the upper right corner throbbed. He set his iPod face up on the ground. Then he threw his hips against the door, and after one pathetic squawk, the perimeter was breached. Sure enough, the night silence remained. Had there actually been a working alarm system at all? Apollo couldn't say. But he skirted his way around the little tablet on the ground anyways, just to be sure he wouldn't interrupt his wizardry. He followed Patrice inside. The iPad stayed outside, standing guard. Chapter 74. Patrice carried the flat blade shovel, the crowbar, and the axe. Apollo had taken only one tool from the maintenance building, a mattock, heavy as the shovel and the axe combined. A 4-foot wooden handle topped by a 2-head metal device. On one end sharp like a pick, and the other end was called a daze. The daze looked like an axe head, but instead of it being vertical, it was horizontal, like a weapon out of the Dark Ages, something for smashing through armor. This made the dig through hard-packed dirt like the kind they were likely to find here in the winter. Okay. Apollo and the iPad tucked under his free arm. Apollo scanned the rows of grave sites as they moved. Brian Kagwa had a grave marker instead of a tombstone. 12th row and 9 grave markers in. There it was. He felt compressed, all out of breath, seeing the name Brian. Brian. Are we really going to do this? Apollo didn't understand it had been with him, asking the questions until Patrice responded. We don't have to, my man. We can get back in the whip right now. Apollo nodded absently. That's what we should do. Sure. Right. He stared at the plot and practically heard his nerves playing like cello strings in the night. You got to give me a little help, he whispered. He wasn't sure what he was asking for. Patrice dropped the tools and slipped the iPad free. After a few more taps, he read from the screen. I found instructions. Okay, remove the side using the flat blade shovel. He looked up at Apollo. I don't know how to do this, some shit like that, but maybe I can find a video. Military man, Apollo said. I could defuse a road-sized bomb if you had one, he offered. Apollo dropped the mattock and pulled the shovel from Patrice. He placed the thin edge of the shovel into the ground, then pressed downward with his right foot until it sank into the dirt. After after the head of the shovel went about 2/3 deep, he pulled the handle back, causing a crunching noise like a paper bag being crumpled. He slipped the shovel out, moved one step to the right, and did the same thing again. Within 20 minutes, he had pulled up the whole layer of sod over the grade. It was easy to pick up with the clumps and toss them aside. They looked like used tea bags in the dark. By the time they finished, his arms pulsed with fire. Too cold out to really sweat, but his face felt clammy. His breathing had grown so loud it sounded like a panting dog. When he finished, he found Patrice gawking. Where'd you learn how to do that shit, shitty boy? Me and Emma used to watch those home improvement shows, Apollo explained between gasps. Patrice nodded. Me and Dana watched those too. Apollo tossed the shovel away. Now hand me that thing. Patrice gave Apollo the mattock. Neither of them knew what it was called. It certainly had never been used on the home improvement shows, but Apollo intuited its method. Okay. He turned the day's end of the head so it faced the rectangle of the dirt he'd uncovered. The soil, so dark, it looked like a pool of black water. When Apollo stepped in, Patrice expected him to sink. Apollo raised the mattock and brought it down hard into the earth. We can take turns, Patrice offered. Apollo nodded. When I can't lift my arms anymore, we'll switch. You need light? Patrice asked. I got this app. One of mine. I wrote it myself. It's called Daylight. Maybe you could save it until we get deeper down, Apollo said. He didn't notice the pride in Patrice's voice. He had his own work to do. Patrice nodded softly, embarrassed by how much he'd been fishing for praise. Apollo brought the mattock down. Their days sank into the dirt, satisfyingly deep, but it sent an electric shock up through Apollo's arms, right into his shoulders. Hard earth. He'd be tired sooner than he thought. He looked at Patrice and felt so grateful for his friend. This feeling was followed by the desire, the need, to ask Patrice why he started the Facebook page and why didn't he tell Apollo. For a moment, he had the worst thought of all. What if Patrice was on kindergarten's side? What if he was one of those 10,000 men? It seemed impossible. He knew Patrice, didn't he? But now, he also knew he couldn't trust his own judgment. Maybe the man driving that car had plans with Patrice, and right now Apollo was digging his own grave. Patrice or someone else might just shoot him in the head and leave his body in the hole he dug. Nothing for it, though. If Patrice was going to betray him, he'd just have to deal with it then. For now, he raised the mattock and brought it down again. Dirt sprayed back up into his face, coating his skin, causing an itch along his neck. It's 1 a.m, Patrice said. This better be over by 5. Apollo wiped his face, scratched his neck, put both hands on the mattock handle, and raised it again. Chapter 75. We'll see how we feel. This might be the last chapter right now, family. But we'll see how we feel once we get to the end of it. 4 feet doesn't seem that deep, but it took them 1.5 hours to clear half that much. Okay. Patrice and Apollo had changed places twice already. As one broke up the dirt, With the mattock, the other standing outside the hole, used the shovel to clear the soil. Both of them looked as if they had run a marathon inside a coal chute. Dirt on their clothes, on their hands, in their hair, in their ears. Each man alternated between digging with his jacket on until he was so sweaty his shirt stuck to his skin, then slipped the coat off in order to dry out, and within minutes, getting the shivers all over. By 3 in the morning, they were 3.5 feet down. Okay. Patrice sat on the rim of the grave. Apollo remained in the hole. He couldn't lift the mattock again, so he dropped it. His stomach shrank with hunger, and his rib cage burned from his heavy breathing. I know, Apollo said. I know about you and the baby Brian page. Patrice shifted where he sat. Dirt fell from his perch into the hole. I told you I joined it when I took the train out to Long Island. I didn't hide that from you. Not on purpose. But you didn't tell me the rest, Apollo said, leaning back against the dirt for fear he'd collapse. You didn't tell me that you started the page. Why would you do that? If you're my boy, why would you? Start it? You mean like I'm the administration for that shit? I wouldn't do you like that. I wouldn't. The day I went out to the island, you left a message on the board. Green hair Harry, that's you. Patrice opened the iPad, shaking his head as he did. He opened the Facebook app. Apollo watched him as he tapped his way toward the tribute page. Why keep playing, Apollo asked. Just say fuck it, and let's have it out. Patrice's eyes scanned left to right. Apollo watched him reading. Then seconds later, Patrice's eyes grew wider as reading turned into deeper comprehension. That's not me, Patrice said. That's not. When you left your place, me and Dana just sat there straight up shook for like half an hour. I couldn't believe Kim would do you like that. My dude, I'm telling you this, we went straight to bed like we were hauling up in the cave or something. Couldn't fall asleep for hours. I damn sure didn't get on the computer and type you messages. Patrice looked both angry and panicked. He looked at the screen again. Just check out the time when the post went up. It's like 10 minutes after you left. I swear to you, on my mom's, I did not get on that computer for the rest of the night. Apollo bent and gripped the mattock. He hardly had the strength to stand up again, but somehow he found the power to heft that tool. Who else could know I was going? This dude knew, Patrice said, eyes on Maddox's blade. William knew. It was you and me and Dana in that basement. He didn't know I was coming, not for sure, until I showed up in the box. Apollo and Patrice remained in this standoff for 30 seconds that felt like 3 years. Then Patrice sat straight as if he'd been stabbed, shut off the iPad, and closed the cover. What if he was there too? He said softly. How? Titan, Patrice whispered. If he'd hacked Titan, he could turn on my camera, my mic, control all of it remotely if he wanted to. He could have been watching us the whole time. He set the iPad down in the dirt and watched it cautiously. But how could he do that? Apollo asked. How would he even find your computer out of all the computers in the world? Patrice pointed at Apollo's pocket. He sent you that video of Emma. He sent it to me. I ran it on my computer. It would have been that easy for him to hop from your phone to my computer. I gotta warn Dana, he said, taking this out his phone. But before dialing, he froze and turned it off. He opened the back of the phone and slipped his SIM card out. For good measure, he crushed it with the bottom of an axe. My phone and computer are synced, Patrice said. He knows exactly where we are right now. He's not the NSA, Apollo said. Could have fooled me, Patrice said. He gestured for the mattock now and slid into the hole. I want to get back to my wife. Let's hurry. Apollo climbed out, barely strong enough to make it that far. He pulled the mattock up with him. Patrice clutched the shovel. So little light fell in the open grave that its bottom couldn't be seen. They might as well have been digging into the underworld. All right, we'll read one more chapter and then wrap up, family. Yeah, for sure. It's short, chapter 2. Chapter 76. By 4:30, Apollo took over again. Patrice lay by the open grave, so exhausted he looked as if he had fallen asleep. The dirt was down to inches. Though Patrice offered to switch with Apollo, Apollo didn't reply. His body hurt so badly it had gone cold. The aches in his arms and shoulders, his lower back and his knees. He would pay for all of this later, but he'd become exhausted in a way that made him invulnerable. Willpower was all he used to dig now. Then, to Apollo's great surprise, the sun rose behind him, but it came much too quickly and in the wrong place. From the west, a blinding light appeared. So powerful, Apollo dropped his shovel and covered his eyes. Patrice said, "I thought you needed help seeing." The beam of brightness came from Patrice's iPad. The screen glowed like a molten globe. Apollo couldn't even make out Patrice behind the pad, so his voice became disembodied and divine. "I bring you daylight," Patrice said. Apollo looked down into the grave. He could see everything now. The shovel had fallen at an angle. His shoes and pants were so matted with dirt they looked soggy. And below him, he clearly saw the shape of an outline. The casket? Could we really have reached it? He started to fear there would be no end to the dig. Apollo went down on one knee and patted the earth. Then Patrice's iPad beeped 3 times, and right after that, the light died out. "Eats up a lot of battery power," Patrice said. "Even a full charge only gets you 4 minutes. Wow, Jesus. It works on tablets and phones." "It helped," Apollo said. He tapped the head of the shovel against the dirt. "Almost there." The shovel dug into the dirt and a dull thump played in the graveyard. Apollo brought the shovel down again. Once more, a solid thump. Apollo bent forward and brushed at the dirt until a flat gray surface appeared. Beside him, above him, Patrice perked up. Apollo went to his knees, wildly brushing with his hands. But then, this horrible choking noise rose from out the hole, a sob of turmoil. Apollo raised his hands and slapped at the buried thing. "It's not a casket," Apollo said. He sounded undone, almost unraveling. "Tell me what you see, Apollo." "It's concrete." Apollo pushed himself onto his knees and cleared more of the dirt. A flat block of concrete, like a panel of sidewalk. "That's the grave liner," Patrice said. There's two kinds of solid concrete and sectional panels. The panels are cheaper, easier to break. Which one do you think your mom paid for? How early would the Nassau Knolls maintenance crews arrive? This was the question. How long before the sun rose just enough for a neighbor to open her second floor bedroom curtains, peer out at the day, and see 2 black men at an open grave? Apollo used the shovel to push himself onto his feet. How long would it take to chop through it? And how loud would that noise be? "Drop me that thing down," Apollo said to Patrice, "the one I was using." A large silhouette moved, and a movement later, the mattock fell into the grave. Its head had landed on the sharper end, the one shaped like a pick. The thing made a loud popping noise as it landed and sank into the concrete, like a thumbtack going into a bulletin board. Apollo pulled the mattock, but it was stuck. He crouched and leaned backward and wrenched the tool out. And when he did, a sound like ice cubes being cracked out of a tray played in the hole. Apollo tapped at the concrete liner with one foot, and it felt to waver. He brought the mattock down to another terrific chorus of cracking concrete. 4 blows with the mattock, and the sectional liner turned into dust. And there lay a child's casket, white. The decorative hardware, handle rock, rod bracket caps, stamped metal corners, all antique nickel. Apollo crouched and ran his hand along either side of the casket, searching for a groove between the lid and the base. He couldn't bear the idea of chopping through the top of the casket. He couldn't do it. He found the space and slipped the pick end of the mattock inside. And when he wrenched it open, the locking system groaned and finally came apart with an almost wet snap, like a tooth being torn out of a jar. He pulled at the small lid. Halfway up, it caught, and he dropped the mattock, used two hands to pull it the rest of the way up. He heaved and bent low in the posture of a supplicant. The dawn light reached along the top of the gravesite, though it remained darker down in the hole. And finally, for the first time in 4 months, Apollo saw his child. The mortician had done his best, but Brian Kagwa's face still bore the burn marks. The skull showed through at the top, gray as grief. His tiny body had been wrapped in a light blue blanket. In the chaos of opening the casket, dirt and stones fell onto the pillow. Across the blanket, across the body, Apollo looked down on his son, once sealed away clean, but now soiled. "Look what I did to my boy," Apollo whispered. He'd been wrong to think Cal and Emma had anything but insane. They convinced him not to follow common sense. Maybe he hadn't wanted to be sensible. Better to believe in monsters than that your child was dead. He closed the lid of the casket, then opened it once again. He couldn't bear the thought of his baby boy lying in the dirt, lying with dirt on his face, pebbles in his hair. The least he could do, the very least, was to wipe his son's face clean. He touched the boy's forehead, and with that, he broke the spell. All right, we'll pick up there, family, next week. Again, as always, I appreciate your energy, your time, your support. Alexa, turn off living room lights. So I appreciate your support as always. Come join us on Tuesday as we continue to discuss ego as function based and identity based, so that we can start recognizing when our ego is taking over and which version of our ego is taking over, all in the effort to make sure that we function with a healthy ego, because we do not need to destroy our ego. We need to integrate it, and that is integrating the understanding of how the ego functions so it can affect our behaviors. If you can't make it Tuesday, I hope to see you back here Thursday again for book club. I appreciate you again. I appreciate your time, your effort, and your energy. And before we go, family, let me remind you that you are divine. You are connected to the universe. You are at peace. You are a spiritual being, and you can release doubt and welcome faith. Again, I thank you, family, and peace as always. I see you, Cuzzo. I appreciate you. I see you, Cuzzo. I appreciate you.